and welcome back to another early adopter edition. And in this episode, we're going to talk about Gantt, G-A-N-T-T. So let's get started. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the steps to create a Gantt chart. I simply just want to call it a Gantt or a Gantt view. And we're going to get into creating your human resources, whether those are individual people or groups, and roles, and some tips and tricks to follow along the way. We're also going to talk about assigning resources to elements as soon as possible during model creation. And the author in Sparx is not necessarily the owner of a Gantt element in its delivery. We're going to talk about accessing Gantt from the construct tab or from the diagram switch views capabilities. While in Gantt, we're going to use or look at the quick access menu for various tasks. We're going to talk about element note versus resource note, then when and why to use Gantt. We're also going to get into Gantt analysis and some tips and tricks and things that I do when using Gantt, I should say. And we're going to talk about productive workspaces. Each project, whether it's just you or it's your company delivering a product, starts at a particular point that's most productive for them. That could be brainstorming and trying to figure out, well, what's the main topic? And then what are the other topics and subjects that are related to it? May start with requirements and developing those to help them understand the nouns and verbs around the problem to be solved. Could be starting with a block diagram and understanding of their architecture, and then going to brainstorming exercises around different architecture levels and developing requirements around those particular applications to fill gaps in their product realization strategies. Whether you're starting with a use case to understand your problem domain, or you're starting with requirements engineering, you're going to need at some point to start asking some questions like, who's assigned to this particular requirement and its responsibilities and delivery? Who's responsible for use case? When you're adding activities and actions, who owns the activity and action? You do that through Gantt. And there's a couple of ways to get to Gantt views that we've talked about in this channel. One of them is at the diagram level, where you simply choose a diagram, you go to switch views, Gantt view, and there you are. You're able to assign resources and do a lot more. Another way is to go to the construct tab in Sparx and go directly to Gantt view. We're going to hit this down caret here, and you have two choices. My Gantt view, which is basically your responsibilities in a given project, or the entire project Gantt view. Let's go into project Gantt view. And in here, you can see the resources that are within the project. And if you expand on those, you're able to see what the resources are responsible for and the timelines for that responsibility. When you're looking at my Gantt view, you're simply looking at you and your responsibilities to particular assets. And this is a very simple view. So here I'm responsible for e-commerce site. I am the solution architect, and then I have a time frame, and then I have a task that's given to me by the project manager or project team. And I'm able to do a lot of things in here in managing the start date, the end date, and the time allocation that I might particularly have, as well as some other important data relevant to that delivery. Before you get started with Gantt views, the first thing you need to do is we're going to go to settings. We're going to go to reference data panel, model types, people. And here is where you're going to define your authors right here, or your group. So here we've got an individual. Here we have a group. You're going to define your roles. You need at least one in each to get started. All right, this is very important. Let's demonstrate a simple exercise. Here we have 5 requirements for a particular project, and we can switch views. We can go to the specification view and understand the status, difficulty, priority, and the nouns and verbs relevant to each one of these requirements. We can also right-click in here and switch to Gantt View and then start making some assignments. You may be in a conference call, you may be collaborating online in real time, and there is some roles that are either being assigned by a project manager or you self-assign yourself if you have the permissions to do so. Now, the requirements engineer on day 1 may just be working one requirement at a time. They may come up with 5 requirements. They can go into the specification view here. At any particular point, they can switch views and go into Gantt, either themselves or working with the project manager, and they can assign themselves. So they're working on this requirement here, assign resource. They're going to come into resource and they're going to assign themselves. Now, they could just say, well, I'm working with a group and I'm just going to assign requirement engineers, and their whole responsibility is around requirement engineering. And then they're going to give themselves some sort of description of what they need to do, something like that. And then they may come in and say, we're going to start this one tomorrow, and it's going to take us a couple of days to work through it. So we believe we're going to be done by Monday on this one. And you have an opportunity to put other data or commitments in here or not. You can just leave it 0 and just go from there. And then we can hit apply. And then you can see here that a requirement engineer has been assigned to this over this duration. And then you can roll the mouse button back and forth to 0 in, and there's other things that you can do within the Gantt view. We'll try to talk about that more in a moment. The solution architect may come in to the Gantt chart, Gantt view, if they're allowed to by the project manager and self-assign. So we're going to come in here, solution architecture, and then we can assign a role and responsibility. It's going to be myself as the chief architect. I'll put down a description here and get started, and I can come in and put other metadata in here as we proceed. But in the beginning, I may go through here on each one of these and start to say, I'm going to take a role and responsibility as part of requirements engineering analysis, and I am going to work this within my capacity. Now we can come in on these requirements and we can start a journal entry that I need to have these requirements done to start solution approach by 9:15. I can start a discussion with the requirements engineering group with the same type of request, and we can collaborate here, and they can make adjustments. They may come in and basically say, yeah, we can be done by the 15th. And then I'm able to come in and start my work this week because it's going to take me 5 days because we have to be done, let's say, by the 19th on that. And that can be applicable to all of these. So the requirement engineer then can come in and say, all right, we're going to come up with a start and an end date on each one of these. Maybe all of them are done in one day. Maybe they're not. Maybe it's going to take them working over the weekend or a couple of days to complete each one of these. So in Sparx, you're able to go into the Gantt view, make these adjustments, and then I, as the solution architect, can come in and very quickly make changes in my time scale here on when I'm able to get this work done or at least started. And we may work in iteration with each other on these in order to accomplish a particular task. In this case, the task is around requirements engineering for 5 simple requirements. You're starting to see how fast this is to do at the diagram level. During a call or offline, you're able to very quickly come up with a Gantt view of the elements in the model right in front of you. Then you can go to the Construct tab here in Sparx, go to Gantt, and let's look at my Gantt view. In this particular case, we have the chief architect responsible for a requirement specification report, but also responsible for certain applications that are part of the block diagram necessary for delivery. Another thing you can do is go into the project Gantt view, and let's go to the requirements engineer. They have these requirements they're responsible for and these timeframes, and the solution architect and their roles and responsibilities. Let's zoom out a little bit here. Just select anywhere in the Gantt line view and then zoom out and look at a couple of weeks for delivery. Now you'll notice in these three views, this is the project Gantt view. We have solution architecture as a resource. This is a group. Here is myself, UML operator, and here's requirements engineers as a group. When we go into personal tasks, we don't see what UML operator, that's me logged in to this particular project, what I'm assigned to. And then if I go to requirements, you can see here, these are assigned to solution architecture as a group and not an individual. So I could come in here working with the project manager as well as solution architecture group, and I can assign myself. So we're going to go in here and simply make the changes to assign this work to a specific individual from a group. Now I've gone ahead and made the changes here, assigning myself as an individual to these requirements and part of their delivery. And if we go back over to the project Gantt view and refresh, now you can see that UML operator has been assigned to these work items to deliver the solution for these requirements. And now when I roll back over to construct and I tab and I go to my Gantt view, personal task here, you can see I've been assigned to these 5 requirements for their delivery. And again, I'm going to roll out and I'm able to manage a particular views on what I, as the chief architect in this case, need to work on at any particular point within the project delivery. Now here's a pro tip. I just happen to think that I'm going to go ahead and close personal task and project Gantt view, and I'm just going to go back to the requirement view. I find it much easier and more productive to work from this view. When you start getting a large project, your Gantt charts can get a couple of pages long and very hard to filter out and get to the work that you focus on. In this particular view, I'm focused on these 5 requirements, and I very quickly want to get to my assignment and then work with the team using collaboration, discussions, review capabilities on these items, online or offline, to work through delivery. So the switch to Gantt view from the diagram is far more productive than working in the other Gantt views, in my opinion. Now I'm in my custom layout, and for working with Gantt views and doing delivery analysis, this is not as productive as it could be. So I can create my own custom layout, but Sparx has a canned layout that I just think is very productive. So we're in the Start tab, we're going to All Windows panel, we're going to go to Workspaces, and right here, and we're going to look at the canned workspaces that Sparx provides. We're going to go to Resource Management and hit Apply. And it's going to change our workspace layout where we have Project Browser on the left, which is fine. We have the Gantt view for the diagram in this area, work area here. And below it, we have something called Resource Allocation. And there's a couple of ways to get the resource allocation. This is one. You can also right click and you'll see here, Show Element Resource Allocation. The shortcut keys are Control-Shift-7. But this workspace layout brings up resource allocation underneath it, where I'm able to look at myself and what I'm working on. So if we're on this requirement or down here on this requirement, you really can't see a change. But as I'm evolving, so does the Gantt view. Let's just pick this particular one right here, requirement 2. Over in the lower right where we have notes, if we select Requirements Engineer, we see the notes relevant to the action. So here's a description of what they need to do in this task. here's any history. I'm going to go ahead and close. Let's go to this one here. So here's a description of the task. Here's some history that they can post as they're working through their delivery. They can change their metadata, of course, working with project manager and so on as they're going forward and collaborating online with that. So when we're looking at the notes here, we see the notes for the requirement as they're being developed between the requirements engineer and the solution architect, all in one note field for this requirement. And that's a convention. Solution architect may be creating their own element with a solution and so on. So as we're going through these resources, we're seeing the notes for the requirement, notes for the requirement, and so on as we're going forward. We're in resource allocation. We can go to the particular resource and we can see the notes for the resource working on that. So in this particular case, we see the description of the task and then any history provided by the resource that's working on that. So whether they do that in this view or whether they're looking at that in this view, they're able to apply what they're working on at any particular point. Also note when you're in this particular view, you select an item, you have properties in the upper right. If I go to, I'm on requirement 01, I go to the resource, I see the properties relevant to this assignment. So I can double click, manage the properties here, or if I select the element down here in resource allocation on requirements 01, I can manage the resources here. So let's say, for example, I complete this one, I'm 100% done. There we go, this one's done. I can come in here, time spent, 5 hours, time allocated was 8, we expended 5 hours. Just like that. So I can make changes in the data very quickly through resource allocations, not in the Gantt view. In the Gantt view, I'm going to see properties. In resource allocations, the properties are going to change, allow me to manage the data in each one of these. Let's say we're in a situation and we're looking at resource allocation and we don't feel we can make a date. It will turn red on you until you negotiate some changes. The interesting thing here is that I can't change, this becomes locked. I cannot change this here like I can here because this one's not in jeopardy, and I'm able to change the scale of the delivery timeline that you see up here, and this one's locked until we negotiate some sort of capacity change. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and double click on this one. I'm going to open it up. And what I'm going to do is change the date to go all the way to Friday. And then I'm going to hit apply. You'll see that the red jeopardy or red disappears on this one as we're working forward. And they'll determine whether they can start on the next day or let's say in this particular case on the 11th, which is a Thursday, and they might work through the weekend, or they can have it done by Friday, which overlaps when the solution architect wanted to start or change to Friday the 12th on this particular item. You can very quickly manage that here. And if I'm on requirements 5 right here, I go to resource allocation, we're able to make notes here, historical changes. We can double click on here as far as assigning the resource. We can make changes in resource assignment, more description and notes, even supporting the red jeopardy and history around the negotiation on this particular item to achieve particular dates that help in the delivery. All of that through the Gantt view as you're working back and forth in the particular diagram and particular views that you might want to be on, one of them being the Gantt view. Now let's go over some tooling that's available to you. If you right click anywhere in here, you have specialize, export to external data provider. This is an advanced subject we're not going to cover here. If you're connected to an external provider like Jira or other external providers, you can actually export the data that's here to that provider. collaborate. We've talked about this a great deal, about discuss and review. Switch views we've talked about. Assign resource, pretty simple. You can assign a new resource that's there. We'll bring this back up again. Show element properties. You can bring that up, and we're on this particular requirement. It's going to bring up the property window. If we can bring this back up again. Overdue items. This is too small of a Gantt chart, but if you're working in a larger one, things become red and you want to just show overdue items, it'll filter to that. Edit filter. I really like having the filter on. That's this bar that's right up here that allows me to filter items. So we're in a very large project. I just want to look at requirements. They start with REQ. I am able to filter that out. Maybe BUS, but be able to filter. I want to look at requirements. I can filter here. I want to see things that are 100% complete. I can filter there. I can turn that off. Let's turn this filter off here and hide filter. I like having filter open, expand branch. Don't need to use that. Sometimes you're going to have a dozen resources that are assigned. So you might, when you start out, everything may be minimized and you want to expand the branch. You can do that and it can expand the branch for you. Collapse all, it'll collapse everything open. Maybe you had a few items that were open and it's starting to get a little bit messy. You can come in here, collapse all, save image to file. This is a big one. You can actually save this view to an image file, and then you can bring that image file into a document. That's a big one. Copy image to clipboard. This allows you to paste from that instead of saving it to a file, to a clipboard, and then Control V and paste that in there. Of course, you've got refresh and you've got Sparx help if you need it. All right, we're going to wrap up now. Woo, that was a long one, but very important. There's a lot of folks who've been asking questions about Gantt and Gantt views. There were some problems with the usage of Gantt, the three types or three approaches that I talked about. So hopefully this episode has helped you. Please let us know if you've got questions or concerns down in comments below. Let us know if you have any challenges that you need to overcome. Most importantly, let us know, are you even using Gantt? I mean, is this important to you? I think the reason that we get Sparx EA is because of its data, its versatility, and all of the toolings. So again, I hope this episode was helpful for you. And until that next one, happy modeling.